So for my 100th inclination video, which I mean is long past, but I said I would do this anyway, so here I am. But for my 100th inclination video, I thought I would do something about explaining why I've created this video series. Because at the initial starting of me doing this series is that I noticed there's a gap in video content within the scene, within the League of Legends scene. And not only that, but opinionated solo video content. I noticed that really no one was really making this. And so this was kind of an avenue for me to just kind of attack. And I figured that my own personality should also be able to fill that role, because I'm a very opinionated guy, and I also don't have a problem with sharing my opinion, whether it be something that is brash or something that is more reserved or just a measured opinion. Like, I have no problem with any of those different aspects. And not only that, but I don't really care if people react to it in a negative or positive way. It's whatever that they feel about it. But I figure that my own personality would be able to slot into this niche somewhat decently well. So this is something that I thought of in the very beginning. And not only that, but I feel like the video content is actually valuable from my own personal growth standpoint, because shouting into the void kind of makes you understand yourself just a little bit more, in the sense that you get to kind of expound and unravel an idea, just free flowing, right? It's a freestyle idea that you don't really know where you're going to end up when you create a video and you start just talking about a particular topic, because it's not necessarily super structured. It's not written out like, the writing format. And this goes more towards the name of this entire series, which is, my name, and then Inclination. And this goes back to just my whole thought process and how I think, because I actually don't really think ahead a lot of the time. I have a problem with not even thinking in the present. It's more so that I just have a blank mind for the majority of me just going about my day, doing regular actions or whatnot. And if I'm not concentrating on thinking, I most likely won't think at all. Like, I won't have anything that randomly pops into my head like, oh, that's a good idea, or that's a good idea, or, what have you. I have to actually think about the particular topic in order to arrive into some other aspect of that topic. And so most of the time my mind is actually just a void. And the greatest comparison that I can make to that would be like what a lot of people consider as like Zen, which, I'm not saying like I've reached a state of Zen or whatever to where my mind is at peace or blank or tranquil, but that's like the closest thing that I can explain to someone else and like how my thought process works. So with that premise said, this is actually where the name comes from, is that it's an inclination. It's a thought and something that I lean towards, but it's just an initial impression, and it's not necessarily permanent. It's something that is like a flicker, something that instead of me sitting down and actually having to think about something like in the written format, where I sit down and I have a specific task that I can put down onto paper and then mold together as I see fit. This is more so just me doing a freestyle essentially, and not really thinking what's going to happen next, because I don't really have that capability to do anyways, just from my own thought process, which I explained. So I realized, this and that whole aspect, and that's where this inclination word comes from. At least my interpretation of that word may not be the actual dictionary definition. I know it's actually, inclination is leaning towards something, but this is what I thought of it. And so when I started making these videos, I realized that it's more about how you can articulate them and express your own thoughts rather than the inert or maybe initial thought itself, right? The idea isn't as interesting as the explanation of the idea itself, right? It's the entire packaging which actually makes it something great. And so even though you might have a great idea in and of itself, if you aren't able to present it in a dressed up way or in a way that appeals to people, then no one's going to give a fuck about it. So you should probably put a large effort into making it to where you can articulate yourself and you can actually express those initial ideas. And I think a lot of people have a problem with doing that. And so this video series was based upon building, I guess, the walls, of a house, right? It's not just the studs or the actual initial scaffolding or the framework of the house. It's actually building the plaster drywall. It's about the paint. It's about sexing it up a little bit in that sense. And so that's something that I've been working on within this video series rather than writing, because I actually think my writing still surpasses my speech in a sense. I feel like my skills as a writer is actually greater than my skills as, an orator, if you will. But I feel like I've closed the gap just a little bit more as I've done 100 inclination videos. And so with that said, though, I think there is value in the video format that a lot of people actually aren't taking advantage of within the esports space. And so that's where I saw that gap, right? Because I feel like speech is more free-flowing than writing, which is a good thing. It's something that isn't structured. It's not writing to where I have to create a rough draft, or first I actually have to start with the initial bullet point ideas. And then I have to create the rough draft, and then I have to edit that rough draft, and then I have to have someone else edit that draft, and then I finally have to go back and include all of those suggestions and things, write the final, and then even get that further edited just to make sure, and then it goes out. So with video, it's more free-flowing. It's that you create maybe a structure, maybe you do some bullet points on a Word document or something, but other than that, it's just me kind of talking out of my ass and just coming up with the next thing that maybe pops into my head. So I find that's something valuable in terms of learning in a different way or expressing yourself in a different way, and that's what this inclination is about. It's about doing it in a different format and leaning towards a different thought process, I guess you could say. Now, as far as the success of this series, really hasn't been successful. Like, the reception has been lukewarm, if I want to be honest, but that's not the entire purpose of this series itself too, right? If I wanted to create the most engaging content, or the content that gets the most views or whatever, I would just be strictly an interviewer and work myself off of a player's brand or something, and then therefore it increases my brand. But that's not what that's about at all. Like, this is about just engaging in solo content and extrapolating my own ideas into the space, and then it going from there. And I feel like not many people watch these, but those that give them a chance, I feel, enjoy them to some degree. And so I think although that is a small victory and that it's a small number, it's still something that exists. And if I can entertain people in that aspect, I think that's still a win regardless. And not everything is about numbers at the end of the day anyways. It's about the enjoyment or personal growth that you gain from it. So overall, I've enjoyed this journey, I guess you could say, in this series in and of itself, and I don't have any plans of stopping. We'll get onto the 200th inclination or 500th, but as I go along, I feel like I'm developing my own capacity for knowledge, or my own logic and different just pathways of actually coming to a specific conclusion about esports knowledge. And so that's really, really valuable. I think that can transfer over into other sections of my work as I produce them, whether they be interviews, whether they be written pieces, written analysis, those different types of things. They all bleed over into one in one case or another, and those skills transfer over quite easily. And that should be the same case with video content as well too. And so I feel like not a lot of people do this type of content. I feel like a lot of people are actually afraid of putting out opinion pieces, and opinion video content is even more daunting because they can actually see you and see where you're going. You might slip up in a video and you might say something stupid, and there's less editing involved within the entire process of video. So that becomes an even more kind of scary process. But I think it's something in which more and more people shouldn't shy away from. And this is kind of like my series to say that it's possible for someone to actually do this and develop their own skills and see the progression of that person. So I found this journey quite enjoyable, and I have no plans in stopping this Inclination series.